Everyone calls me Tall Tony. Bet you didn't see that coming, right? I was known by many in the nightlife industry as the bitch with the list, hosting the biggest parties in the hottest clubs every weekend for 20 years. It all started after I moved to Toronto and became a featured dancer on Electric Circus. Back then, I was a club kid that wore PVC separates, platform boots, bob wigs, and anything else that mattered. Nightclubs began to invite me to host parties after the show, and that's where I met a small group of friends that began to call me Tall Tony. 3 years later, one of those friends seduced me to work with him at the biggest nightclub in Toronto at the time, the Government. And he gave me business cards with the name Tall Tony on them. Immediately, I was rubbing elbows with international DJs, models, and celebrities, all the while working in finance on Bay Street. I was a banker by day, club kid by night, but nobody knew other than my close personal friends that I had a day job. You see, I thought being a banker wasn't cool enough to be Tall Tony, so I never allowed my nightlife persona to discuss my daytime career, and nobody ever asked. The only annoying thing about being this tall is that everybody thinks that I'm a basketball player. Imagine walking out of your home every single day knowing that no matter where you go or what you do, you're going to be stared at and prejudged constantly by strangers, simply because you are a walking stereotype. In certain circles, we call that walking while black. And after 20 years, it's created a level of self-consciousness that resides at my core. Now, don't get me wrong, I love being this tall. Growing up in Halifax, I was short, fat, and gay, and assumed to be female until the age of 15. By the time I moved to Toronto, I was 22, 6'5", 185 pounds. It was 1994. And for those of you who are quick with math, no wrinkles. I adulted in Toronto, living two completely separate lives for 20 years until one day I decided to merge the two and become an entrepreneur. I had scheduled my first client, and my launch event was scheduled for July 9, 2016. By this time, my work history consisted of 16 years with two national banks, 4 years with a nonprofit organization, and 2 years as an entrepreneur. On July 10, 2016, the world I knew flatlined. I had $278 to my name, no job, a failed business venture, had to apply for social assistance, and became food insecure for the first time in my life at 44 years old. I didn't know who I was or who I would become. But the only thing I knew at that time was that I was no longer Tall Tony. Depression set in, and soon my mind began to consider decisions I could never come back from. I felt totally alone and cried almost every day, yet was too embarrassed to tell my friends what was really going on. So the only person I told was my mother. Thankfully, I got my head out of the ditch, and by September, I'd secured a part-time job working in hospitality for various catering companies. I wasn't making a lot of money, but I was grateful to be making more than I had the month before. Fast forward 6 months, I'm on Facebook, and I stumble upon an article that said in 2015, Canada had a $31 billion food waste issue. Now, food waste wasn't a thing for me because I had none to waste, but I read the article from start to finish, and at the end I said out loud, they should feed this food to the homeless. In September 2017, I was still on social assistance, I was still depressed, and I was still food insecure. In that same month, I was scheduled to manage an event for our largest catering partner, and at the end of a 12-hour shift, the CEO offered me a job. Within weeks, I was managing my first event, and at the end of the event, we had over 100 box lunches left over. Seeing the cause of our food waste issue firsthand, I offered to rescue what I could, and did so every event thereafter on my bike. It wasn't until July 2018 when for the first time I couldn't rescue all the food. On my way to the shelter, I became extremely angry with myself because I had put myself in a position that I could not step back from without the proper resources for an employer who seemingly had no other option than to throw this food in the garbage. In that moment of frustration, an Uber Eats driver whips past me on his bike with one of those bags on his back. And I said out loud, I need one of those bags. I got home, I researched the bag, it was $40, and I went, wait a minute, I wonder if I could hire an Uber driver to do rescues for me, and how would I pay him to do it? That thought triggered me to consider all of the other retailers out there that could benefit from this service: grocery stores, food courts, hotels, event venues. The possibilities blew my mind. Right away, I began to research food waste and food insecurity and realized that Canada now has a $49 billion food waste issue, Yet 4 million Canadians are suffering from food insecurity. And at the time, I was one of them. Rotting food creates methane gas, which is 25 times more damaging to the environment than CO2 emissions. Retailer food waste makes up 10% of our national food waste issue, which is $5 billion worth of wasted edible food going in the garbage every single year. Toronto is the largest metropolitan city in this country, and we have more than 20,000 food retailers in the GTA alone. So we are a large part of that problem. Realizing all of this, I decided that I would develop Canada's first barrier-free food waste diversion program. And in May of 2019, I launched Be1 to Give. Be1 to Give is a for-profit social enterprise operating as a delivery app for food retailers with surplus food at the end of the day. Consider us the Uber Eats of food rescue because we redistribute to shelters within the hour of receipt. Since September 2017, I've rescued 10,778 pounds of food, feeding more than 8,000 people in the city of Toronto. The last 3,000 being through my business. Children globally are boycotting school because they're scared they won't have a future. So we as adults need to do our part to ensure that their future lives matter. So I welcome you all to join me on this journey because this is just the beginning. In the past 3 years, I've learned that even in our darkest moments, we can find our purpose in life. As long as you humble yourself to the process, be grateful for what you have, and truly believe in yourself, I promise you will be rewarded in ways you can't imagine. Thank you.